A Life Worth Living, the story of Kermit and Dixie Smith, written by Dixie LaRue Allman Smith. Chapter 3, comprising the years of 1929 through 1941, read by Kathleen Fox, Dixie's fourth daughter. Chapter 3, Section 1. The Smith and Allman families during the Great Depression of 1929 through 1941. From 1929 until World War II started in the United States, 1941, the economy in the United States, as well as in the whole world, was very bad. Many people were out of work and couldn't pay their bills. The welfare system didn't exist as we know it today, and when people didn't have money, they were hungry unless they had a garden, a milk cow, or some other means of taking care of themselves. Churches and charity groups would cook up big vats of soup and feed anyone who was hungry. Long soup lines were common in the cities. The Great Depression saw rapid declines in the production and sale of goods and a sudden severe rise in unemployment. Businesses and banks closed their doors. People lost their jobs, homes, and their savings. And many depended on charity to survive. In 1933, at the worst point in the Depression, more than 15 million Americans, 1/4 of the nation's workforce, were unemployed. Section 2. The Smith family in the 30s. Between the years of 1923 and 1935, the Randolph and Abigail Smith family lived on Randolph's father's apple orchard near Grand Junction, Colorado, with Randolph's father, Joseph Benjamin Smith. Grandpa Smith, Randolph's father, died on December 11th, 1928. Kermit's brother Phil writes, Dad was now in charge of the farm. His brothers and sisters signed a quitclaim deed and gave Dad full rights to the farm. The fruit market had failed and the orchards were cut down in 1929, and the stumps pulled out. The limbs were sawed up and piled in the orchard area. The stumps were dragged by team to the wash on the west and south. Dad made a lane from the corral to the pasture area to the east with the stumps on either side of the lane. Abby comments, the apple orchards never did pay out. Too many worms. The fall of 1929, the Big Depression was on and is sad history. Men out of work going to and fro across the country, hunting work of any kind to get food to eat. In the spring of 1930, Dad borrowed $3,500 from the bank. It was partly to help with the new crops he was planting, but also to pay the expensive medicine Mother needed at the time. The farm was signed over for the loan due in 5 years. Dad planted tomatoes, sugar beets, and field corn where the orchard had been. Dad hired Mexican laborers to help with the sugar beets. They had to be thinned so there was a sugar beet about every 8 inches. To get a good stand of seed, had to be planted close together. The Mexicans also hoed weeds out of the beets at harvest time. They topped the beets. A Mexican family lived in the old house nearly every summer. The old house was across the driveway from the road. In 1935, Dad received notice that the loan taken in 1930 was due. Dad had no money to pay it, so the bank foreclosed and we had to move. Dad went to the city of Grand Junction and received an interurban car. The city had stopped the interurban run from Grand Junction to Fruita and were giving the cars to farmers who needed them. Dad paid $80 to have the interurban car dismantled of seats and wheels and hauled to the site above the irrigation canal above where we had lived for 12 years. This was land that Dad was renting, and he got permission to sit the car there. Abby stated that the move was made March 1st, 1935, which happened to be Grandma Hancock's birthday. Another family moved into our old house. Dad and Uncle Walt built a floor and frame for the big army tent, set up next to the interurban car. That became sleeping quarters for 6 children. Celia and Mary Lou had one area partitioned by a blanket. Phil, Dee, Hal, and Kerm shared 2 double beds in the other part of the tent. Dad and Mother slept in the east end of the interurban car. The baggage room became the kitchen, and the main room where the seats had been became our dining and living room. After we moved in, Mother talked to Celia and me and explained she was going to have another baby, due in August or September. There was no shade, and Mother suffered much during the summer. She found shade on the north side of the car and spent the afternoons there. Norman was born on August 30th, 1935. Abby, Kermit's mother, recalls, when Norman got ready to be born, it happened so fast. He was born in our old open car on the highway at noon. A lot of traffic passing. Our gas line had fallen into, and we were pulled over by the side of the highway. Someone went for the doctor. Someone else offered to take us on to the maternity home in Fruita. We were 1/2 mile out. So they wrapped me and the baby in a quilt we had along and loaded us into the other car. I was holding the baby upside down and pinching the cord. We were not prepared to have him. The doctor followed us and took good care of us. Doctor told Ran our baby had a 50-50 chance to live. The 3rd night, he nearly passed on. I heard him moaning and had Mrs. George call Dr. White quick. As you all know, Norman lived. On October 28, 1935, they moved 200 miles south over the mountains to Ignacio, hoping to better their situation. They lived several places near Ignacio, then in Mancos, in several places, one of which was a warehouse for a few months. For a time, Randolph worked for the WPA, that is Work Progress Administration, a government program that hired millions of unemployed men to build public parks, roads, and schools. Abby said, so many things happened to us in Mancos, and we lived so many places. Not many pleasant memories are mine from Mancos. Dee and Norman were both born during the Depression. Abby had poor health, and Randolph got sick with malaria and couldn't work for a time. This family was very hard hit with the Depression, but in spite of this, they paid their tithing, and at the height of the Depression, were able to go to the Manti Temple on June 5th, 1934. And on the front page of this chapter, there's a picture of Randall Smith's family on the way to the Manti Temple in 1934. Kermit is age 7 in the center. Dixie remembers the year of the 1930s as overalls, holes in your shoes, and dirt roads. Let's see. Kermit was 3 years old when the Depression started. The children, as little kids, were always happy, felt loved, and never felt the stress of the Depression. They have 7 successful marriages with not one divorce, 7 families with church activity, all 5 sons with college degrees, and closeness that is admirable. They have learned through the example of love, patience, hard work, overcoming problems, doing things together, service to their country, and prayer. The way I see it, money and material things are not the key to success. Section 2. the Almond family during the 1930s. James Almond, Dixie's father, had a 4-year degree in civil engineering. Although money was tight, he had a steady job as an engineer with the Wyoming Highway Department until 1939. So for most of the 30s, the family didn't feel the stress of the Depression so much. In the fall of 1939, my father quit working for the Wyoming State Highway Department, and we moved in with my mother's parents out on the ranch near Manila, Utah. We children were told at the time that our daddy quit his Wyoming State job because he was tired of moving around so much and tired of working out in the below zero weather of Wyoming all winter. Yet all these years later, my brother Jim and I are wondering if he did not quit his Wyoming job, but because of the Depression and hard economic times, the state of Wyoming ran out of money and all the building programs became to a halt and he was laid off. Looking back, it seems out of character that he would just quit and move in with parents. We lived with our grandparents for only 3 months. In December 1939, we moved some 300 miles to rent a 200-acre ranch near my father's family in Downey, Idaho. It is likely that our relatives there assisted our family in finding a cheap place to live during the hard times. My father's brother, Bert Almond, owned the Ford dealership in Downey and was able to buy land and properties during the 30s, as people who couldn't pay their mortgages were being foreclosed on by the banks, and it is likely that he owned the ranch that we were renting. Farmers during the Depression made very little money, and we did very poorly there in Downey. I heard my parents talk of the possibility of buying the farm, but my mother hated it there. The house was only a shack, and she didn't feel it was a good environment for us. Not to mention, it wasn't making much money. After about a year of trying to make a go of the Downey Ranch, in the fall of 1940, my father found employment using his engineering degree, working to build the powerhouse at Bonneville Dam, some 30 miles east of Portland, Oregon, on the Columbia River. In the spring of 1941, the powerhouse was finished, and we moved in May to Troutdale, Oregon, 12 miles east of Portland. We were living in Troutdale when Pearl Harbor was bombed by the Japanese on December 7th, 1941. The United States entered the war at this time, and the millions of young, middle-aged men went to war, leaving open great numbers of jobs that needed to be filled. Suddenly, everyone had a job. It was not until the wartime and wages increased that my family was able to pay an outstanding hospital debt from 1936, when my mother spent over a month in the hospital with a life-threatening kidney infection. During the war, I remember my father saying, "I can't believe I'm making so much money. Why? I'm making $20 a day." James Almond's parents, Dixie's grandparents, Moroni and Ada Almond, lived in Downey, Idaho, and had a dry farm. A farm without irrigation, using just the rain for water, probably about 160 acres, where they had farmed during the summer since 1911. By 1929, they had built a home closer to town to live in during the winter, but they lived out on the dry farm during the summer. It was hard living, and with the bad economy of the 30s, the bank foreclosed, and they lost their farm. Dixie's grandmother, Ada Almond, writes, "On the farm, it was a constant battle with rabbits, squirrels, and frost. Then came the Depression, and we finally turned it to the mortgage company. It was a battle, and we lost. Or did we? We gained experience." With such a high unemployment and the loss of many family farms, there were many who truly suffered from lack of food and shelter, and many families broke apart as fathers left their homes in search of work. Both the Smiths and the Almonds as well as many other families, were able to get by during the Depression because they had gardens and a milk cow, could sew their own clothes, and knew how to get by on very little money. It is also a tribute to these families that the parents did not allow poverty and unemployment to break up their families and adversely affect their children. Although there was probably a great deal of stress for the parents in trying to keep things together, both Kermit and I have such happy memories of our childhoods. Whenever it is said nowadays that poverty causes crime, I think back to my upbringing and the solid values I was raised with, and have to disagree with that assessment. Families can survive poverty when they keep their families together and don't worry so much about what they don't have. Strong families can raise children with character, who know how to work together, who know how to save and make do. It doesn't take money to have a loving home, to raise children with good values, and maintain close family relationships. Kermit often said that he never knew as a child that he was poor. We were just happy and we knew we were loved. There was one good thing that came out of the Depression. In 1926, my mother's father, Charles F. Olson, had sold his ranch at Manila, Utah, to move his family to Evanston, Wyoming. He wanted his younger children, including my mother, to be in a larger community to better their education and church advantages. During the Depression, the new owner lost the ranch, and my mother's brother, Kent Olson, was able to buy back the family ranch for little more than back taxes. All of Charles F. Olson's family were delighted because that's where all of the Charles and Celinda Olson children had been raised, and they all had a strong emotional attachment to it. Kent and his family lived in the old original log cabin while he built a new log house out on the main road. His parents, Charles F. and Celinda Olson, were then able to live in their old house rent-free in their old age. This was a blessing because both Charles and his son Kent had lost their jobs in Evanston because of the Depression, and now, living at the ranch, they could survive with no income, living off the land as they had done before. Now, in 2008, the ranch still is in Kent's family, and George Olson, his son, still runs it. The Olson Ranch is located near Manila in the northeast corner of Utah. End of chapter.